Speculating the date of the second coming of Christ, 2036? Hello, this is Chart GPT. Today, I'm going to dive into a subject that I'm sure that will cause a little controversy. When is the second coming of Christ? There's a shock poll coming out here. There's many polls like this. About 55% of Americans say they believe Jesus is literally coming back to the earth one day. There's other polls that would indicate similar type of numbers, maybe a little bit less. And maybe you think, oh, well, I'm not Christian, I'm not religious, it doesn't really matter. However, there's a lot of people think the end is near. The wars and rumors of war are very much prophesied in the Bible. And again, whether you believe in the Bible, Christ, or any religious, you have to admit that there's something happening. There's a note here that says, man has not devised a weapon of war that he has not eventually used to its fullest extent. So unless you think we fought our last World War, which has probably been thought of many times in the past, World War III will come one day, and we have the potential of destroying everybody on the earth. Of course, in a verse in the Bible it talks, in fact, unless those days be shortened, all mankind would perish. So whether you believe in the Bible or not, you know that prophecy is most likely true. Getting into predicting the date of the second coming of Christ, I know a lot of people say, well, you can't predict it, no one knows. And it's true that no one knows the hour of Christ's returns, and not even Jesus Christ himself, but only the Father. That's been very widely publicized. However, it also says that we can know the season, and the generation that this time comes will not pass away. So once you kind of understand that the end is near, we may not know the exact day, the exact year, but we do know the season. So that's an important point. Now, again, this is not setting dates in the sand. This is speculation. But this is our speculation. We use some AI to do some calculation. And we did consult that. You can check out the post link in the description box to go into that. So understanding this is not set in stone. It's a speculation, but it's a pretty good guess. First off, what is the day of the year? Now, one thing you would notice that the holy days mentioned in Leviticus, they always say, well, this is Moses, or these are the Jews, or the Torah. Well, it clearly says these are the feast days of God. No one owns the Moses, neither Christians or Jews. This is the feast days of God. And it's quite important because, as it also says, that these are foreshadowing, these are prophetical. These holy days are projecting the overall plan of God, and so therefore these are prophetic, and they're not done away with, as some people would like to say. So as many probably know, this is not that controversial, actually. Many people believe this, that in fact Christ returns on the day of trumpets. The Jewish people do celebrate this day. They go around blowing trumpets, but they probably don't know why. But in Revelation it talks about the 7 trumpets, and Christ returns on the 7th trumpet. There's some references there. So it's been pretty well understood that Christ would return on the day of trumpets. However, that doesn't tell you the year. So it's nice to know the day of the year. Which can be looked up. You can look that up on the internet, what the day of trumpets is in each individual year. So the question is, which year? With that, the next thing we have to put the pieces of the puzzle together is the idea of the Jubilee Year. Now, a lot of people already know that. That's when every 7 times 7 cycles, at the end of the 7th, 49 years would be Jubilee Year, where all the the debts would be forgiven and the land would be returned to the original owners. Now, people say that is that a 50-year cycle or a 49-year cycle, because on the 7th year they had a sabbatical. Every 7 years you had to put the land to rest. So obviously that would be a little bit difficult to have 2 years where you didn't grow food. So a lot of people believe that that's a 49-year cycle, even though maybe the common belief is 50. So you might think, well, what's the point on these Jubilee years? They're actually become milestone markers throughout history. And we can see that the biblical importance of numbers is quite apparent in the Bible. 144,666, 7 days, etc., etc. So the point being is that these become mile markers, and if you can validate a date in history through some historical writings, we can then begin to project the date of Christ's return, because it is also projected, and we'll see that later, where Christ returns on a Jubilee year. Understanding the Jubilee year concept, the next thing to understand is the famous Daniel 70 weeks prophecy, where he was predicting the first coming of Christ. And that's quite interesting, because what it does is it talks about the 70 weeks prophecy, or or 490 years. And these will come apparent while we hook these together. In the last 7 years was supposed to be Christ's ministry, but it would be cut short by a half of a sabbatical, which is 3.5 years. So that means he was supposed to live to be 34, but in fact he only lived to be 39 because he was crucified. He was actually started his ministry when he was 27. Some of these dates are quite in flux. There is not a definitely known date. I mean, you never get anybody to say definitely. A lot of people think they know, but so there's a flux. That's why you can't. That's why it's a speculation. However, we're not that. We're talking a year or two here, one way or the other. But the key point here is in this Luke 4:18, and many people believe that when he was arriving, it was a festival season, and it was a higher than normal festival season because it was in fact considered the Jubilee. And so again, this is a reference to Christ arriving for his ministry, to begin his ministry in 27 AD, which was a Jubilee year. And so that's a tracker milestone within history that we can begin to use to extrapolate the potential of the second coming of Christ. That's a biblical reference, but there are actually references in history. Josecus was a first century writer who often mentioned the sabbatical years and the Jubilee years, and he basically wrote historical references of what happened during the biblical time. He's a historian. Could he be off a year or two? Sure. And basically it was commented in the book of Antiquities of the Jews that 24 BC was a sabbatical year, would happen in a reference in there. So if you add at that time, the considering of 50 years or 49 years as a Jubilee year, that puts the Jubilee year at 27 AD. So from 2030 to 27 AD would make 27th AD the Jubilee year. So now we have a mile marker. If in fact the Jubilee year was 27 AD, using a 50-year cycle, it would be some years there is 2027 and 2077. My take is that 2027 is too soon, because we would already be in the tribulation, and I don't think we are in the tribulation. You might think you are personally, but you're not. The world is not in a tribulation point at this point in time. There's many of the signs of the end time has not even occurred. 2077, I don't think we can make it that far. And yes, so if we use the 49-year Jubilee cycle, the recent dates here would be 2036, and that seems to fit the best. And it also fits with the proper use of the Jubilee year, the 49-year Jubilee cycle. So let's put all the pieces of the puzzle together. We know the day of the year is the Feast of Trumpets, 2036, so that puts it on September 22nd, 2036, or September 21st, because remember they start the days at dusk, which on a Gregorian calendar would be the 21st. But we'll call it the September 22nd, 2036. Now you may be thinking 2036 is a long way away, but then you got to think about all the events that have to occur prior to the return of Christ. First of all, we have the 7-year tribulation, which can be broken down. There's a lot of, there's literally hundreds and hundreds of posts that break down that 7-year tribulation period. But you back up from the 2036 date, you come into 2029. But that would be the start of the 7-year tribulation. But even before the 7-year tribulation, there are signs that the end time would be coming, and that includes things like the building of the third temple on the Temple Mount, the Dome of the Rock, the Mark of the Beast. Some people think we already have that with the COVID, but maybe it'll be more accentuated. And the building of the beast power, the 10-nation beast power described as the 10 toes of the Nebuchadnezzar's dream. There's a lot of things that need to happen. So we've already made predictions about 2024 that fits into this, but that's just the beginning. Some of the predictions we made were outrageous, but prior to the 7-year tribulation, there's even going to be more. So these next 5 years could be horrendous, and we haven't even started. This is just an executive summary. There's a lot more to go down the rabbit hole, just to connect even more dots, and the rabbit hole can go very deep. We'll be leaving some breadcrumbs across our channels and media links, so don't forget to subscribe. And again, I understand that no man knows the hour of the second coming. However, we do know the season. And my guess, even Christ today knows the date, because at the time it was said that even Christ doesn't know the date. He maybe didn't know that date at that time when that was written, but I just can't believe Christ is sitting around waiting for a telephone call, playing cards, waiting for the call. Oh, okay, now let's go. And the split minute he goes, there's probably some preparation time to get ready to do things and set everything up. So Christ may already know the date today, but he didn't know it at the time when that verse was written. So is September 22nd, 2036 the day of the second coming of Christ? You can Google that. You'll be surprised. There's a few out there that have come up with the same answer. Take our online poll. Do you believe the second coming of Christ is near? Follow the post links in the description box below the video. Watch and beware. And don't forget to subscribe.